Hello everyone, and welcome to a new series that I'll be doing that's been requested a few times in the comments, of doing really mission walkthroughs, going through step by step from beginning to end how to do certain sortie types on various servers. Going to be kicking this off with Contention, and the first one that I'm going to be covering here is how to do an F-16 SEAD sortie. So how you can take your F-16 to hunt down enemy air defense and get away, hopefully intact. Going to be going through a couple of little sorties that I had here that work pretty well and at least do demonstrate all of the things that you really need to know. Obviously, your sorties are going to be slightly different from this. There is no one perfect way because the mission is different every single time. This should definitely give you an idea of my thought process going into these missions and how to carry them out, hopefully successfully, at least help your team a little bit. So let's jump in. So the very first thing you're going to need to do is decide on where you're going to spawn. So once you've joined the server, join the red coalition is where the F-16 normally is, and click join, and then you can use the dynamic slot system to click on your desired airfield. In terms of what airfield to go for, there are some restrictions. Generally, if your side has been pushing the front down, you may not be able to spawn on a frontline airfield, but just keep trying airfields until you find one that has the F-16 available. And it's just a case of going on the drop-down menu and picking your F-16. Now, once you've done that, the next part is to select your loadout. You can do this from that same screen. You can get your plane all ready and loaded, so you don't have to worry about doing anything on the ground. In terms of my typical loadout for the F-16 for a SEAD mission, what I tend to do is 4 AIM-9Ms on the various wingtip positions, because that's all you can really get there. Then on stations 3 and 7, I tend to use the Mavericks. Up to you which Mavericks you go for. I like the IR Mavericks, and I tend to take 3 of them. Then on stations 4 and 6, I put on my Harm missiles. Now you can absolutely go for an all Harm loadout if you like. I like using the Mavericks when doing this. It gives me a little bit more flexibility if I say get to a target and there is no enemy air defense with radar there, so I can do a little bit else. I can target IR SAM systems, things like that, or just do some general ground attack. And the other advantage is you get more Mavericks than you can take Harms, and this can be useful if you're trying to do, say, a saturation attack far off a bunch of missiles at a particularly well-defended site. Otherwise, on 5L and 5R, I take the targeting pod and the HTS pod. Both are very, very useful for this, as we will see. And then on station 5, I put in a fuel tank. You don't necessarily need a fuel tank. You can, if you prefer, take a jamming pod there, which can be useful. I prefer taking a little bit of extra fuel and just going evasive when I get launched on, but both are absolutely fine. For livery, absolutely up to you. Pick whatever you like. For this one, I've just gone for Baltic Dragon, just because it looks pretty. So I'm not going to be going through too much details of how to actually fly the plane. That's covered in a lot of other videos by a lot of other people. But I will be going through the basic startup here. So first off, I do set the power to main and then set start to. Really just doing the startup so that you get some ideas of what to be doing. So then I close the canopy, set the HDI. That gives the engine a little bit of time to start spooling up. Lock the canopy. Once it hits 20% RPM, you can then advance the throttle out of its idle detent. You can see there I've got a good start. And go over to the right hand side, start stored heading, turn on all the top row of switches, and then move front here to turn on all my various stations. Then do just enable IFF at this point, very important. And also I like to put my plane lights off at this point, just helps me not forget it a bit later. And do put on the radio, don't really need it, but just do it out of habit here. Then turn on my ECM into operation and put it in mode 2. Turn on the power for the ECM systems, arm my flaps, and I like having my plane in manual mode. Then here I'm just turning on the HMC. Really useful to have that on, and then you need to turn on the HUD as well. Now, what I like to do while the alignment is proceeding is to align my HMC. So following the route here, get this nicely lined up, and then it is the TDC trigger button to start the align. Once you're happy with that, you can click M-Select. If you want to go over the details of any of these particular steps, Chuck's guide is amazing for them. I'm just generally showing what I do rather than explaining how I do all of the steps. If you'd like more detailed guides in the future, please do let me know. For now, I'm just doing the general basics here. And by the time you've done that, you can see that a line is flashing, so the alignment is done. So I can flip that over to nav mode, and I can enable my data link. Do just check here on the right MFCD, I should now start getting data link contacts of the friendly targets. Zoom out at this point so you get an eye on where I want to head, and so in this case I am looking to head towards Tayas. Do just get a quick little bit of briefing, just planning ahead of where I want to attack. I want to hit a frontline airfield, getting the vague coordinates there so I know where to head. We will be doing some more setup, but for now I just want to get in the air and start heading towards the target. So here I am, floating along, just taxiing away. Only thing to bear in mind with taxiing is always be on the lookout. Look both ways every time you're crossing any kind of taxiway. Do keep an eye out on other planes, and especially when you're coming to the runway itself, do check it. Now, it's not mandatory to call out your taking the runway, but it's a good idea, particularly if you are on a particularly busy airfield or the server is particularly busy. What you do have to always do is do make sure you check both ways. Make sure nothing is taking off in one direction or landing in the other direction. I do just give out a call here just to be safe. Then take the position in the centre. And then it's just a case of taking off. Now, we are fairly heavily loaded here because we've got pretty much a maximum possible load. And so I do try and get a little bit more airspeed than normal, pushing it to over 190 before I start to rotate. Gently rotate, immediately put the gears up. And there we are. Now I can turn towards my preset coordinates, the ones that I read off the F10 map. And then if I pop this into an autopilot altitude or attitude hold, that gives me time to enter any other coordinates, get all my systems set up while I am en route. So I'm putting it into attitude hold, and then it's time to start setting up my system. First thing I want to do is enter a steer point of my target, so I push the steer point button on the upfront controller. Scroll down to the first entry and click north, and then what you want to do in the top right is to cycle through the various nav modes until you get the second one that starts with north. Then that gives me a coordinates there, and you can just enter the coordinates while you're in that mode. It's very useful to do. Then here I push EO or E0 to start entering the next one, and then again just holding down left control and entering the numbers I see in the top right there. So 3737832. Do just check that's entered, push enter, make sure there's no error. Then we go over to elevation just to get the correct elevation there. Make sure you are in feet in that top mode. So here I just enter the elevation. And there we go, that is my waypoint selected. and that will appear on the HUD, and here on my horizontal situation display it will be visible as a little white circle. Also want to master arm. Very often I master arm on the ground. Here I've decided to wait until I was in the air, but do make sure you master arm. And then I set up my control pages. The left-hand page I like having weapon on the centre and the HAD on the 4th position. And then as I'm heading in, I do just judge here. Typically when I'm about 5 minutes out of target is when I start the warm-up procedure for both the AGM-65, those are my Mavericks, and the Harm 88s. I also do just set my Mavericks here to pre-plan. I find that very useful. And here I'm just activating them both. I am a little bit out of that range, but I'm within 10 minutes of the target, and I am planning just to nip in and nip out, so it should all be fairly straightforward. Other part of the setup though is setting up your harms. By default, the harms are set up to look for blue 4 things, and so you need to set them to look for the red 4. Other way around. Now here I do that by entering these codes 201, 203 and then all the way to 206. Those are the codes for the Roland and Hawk sites. That means that our little harm pod here will be able to see these sites, and so you can use the harm there in target of opportunity mode, which I do like doing. We can also do it using the HAD here, and we'll go through that in just a moment. So here we are on what was actually my first sortie there, slightly different setup just because that was all taken from the second sortie. One thing that's a bit awkward, I did forget to actually record, and so this is the replay of the track file. What that means is we won't get any of the UI, no cursors and so on. But we'll be able to describe what we are going through here. So the HAD there on your left is your main tool while doing SEAD strikes. It picks up the incoming radar signals, just like your RWR is, but it gives you approximate ranging, so you start to get not just a azimuth to where you need to head, which is useful, but you also see which sites are closer to you. Now, using the TDC cursor with that screen selected, you can move it around, and if you hover over any of those points, at the top right there you'll see it says PGM5. That is roughly how confident it is about its location. So at PGM5, this is a very, very vague location. It's just somewhere out there. Now what you can do is click on it. That will set that point as your current SPI, and will slave your targeting pod, which I have open on the right hand side, over to that position. Because this is very, very vague, it's only really guessing at the location. You can see I can't see anything there. Do have my targeting pod set to white hot, makes it a little bit easier to pick out the glowing buildings there. But at this point this is really vague. I'm just heading in the same general direction. I do like trying to pick these out as I go, because every now and then it gets close enough that you can happen to spot something on the targeting pod. But mostly I am closing the distance while at the same time trying to get some more information, and as long as you are in the area you are collecting information about these emitters, you slowly get a better and better picture. Here we can see is I have managed to see the airfield that these are located at, but right now I can't really get a very clear view on any particular targets, any particular launchers. I'm just having a look around to see if there is anything that does jump out as a major threat, because I can always go in with a Maverick even if I spot something that isn't a air defense. Always want to be quite flexible on these flights. Your job is just to help out your team, not necessarily to do exactly what you took off to do. Now you can see that that PGM has rolled all the way down to PGM2, so this is getting quite a lot accurate. Can maybe just see there it was off to the top right. I do miss it in the live run here. But by selecting the hawk sites, I do also train my harms to also be searching for those. Right now the harm doesn't seem too happy with getting a lock, so I'm trying to see if I can get a visual ID on this location. I'm slowly getting within range, can see I'm approximately 3 minutes out. Are getting pings on my RWR from these hawk sites, so I do need to start being a little bit more careful. I am trying to select the site on the left hand side. What I decide to do is go over to the weapon page. This way I look at the target of opportunity mode of my missile, and there we go, I identify it, lock it up by clicking on it, and I fire off a harm. I then wait for the next harm to load up. You can see it is getting its views. These are its view relative to the actual harm seeker. Get a second lock and fire another one off. I could absolutely have gone evasive at first, was happy that I had the range there. You can see that I have been launched on. 3 missiles at this point are coming up at me. Now, what I do here is I try and stay vaguely in their area. I put them on my 9 o'clock to make them turn one way. Then when I'm getting a bit nervous, I do a rollover and turn right the other way while heading for the deck. Heading for the deck means the missile's going through thicker atmosphere, so you can bleed it of energy, and also makes it harder for these ground-based SAM sites to continue tracking you. And by changing direction, you are forcing the missiles to bleed off a huge amount of energy. At the same time here, I'm trying my best to put this on my 3 or my 9 o'clock in order to get into that notch angle, that perfect position where these radars struggle to track you. Now here I can see I'm no longer being locked, everything seems to be fine, and what I did actually find on the time was I do get 2 hits there, which you can see in the third person view just coming up. Missiles come in. As long as the radar is continuing to track you, your harm missiles can continue to track the radar, and they will just go straight in and take out the radar that is actually the one that's looking at you. Now, on this particular run, I did make a couple of other attempts, but I'm down to just Mavericks, and there are still a lot of active hawk sites in that area. I've taken 2 offline, but there are still others that are very angry, and so I couldn't really get close enough to get a good view, and so decided not to push it. Instead, what I did is I returned to Hamar, which did not have any active radar signatures. So what I was doing here is Hamar had been put in as my waypoint. I push the CZ button on the TGP on the right hand side to line up over to that general area, and then I start hunting for targets on my targeting pod. So make my targeting poi the soy, and then start looking for any targets on the ground. Again, looking here in white hot. Here you can see this big thing here, so decide that, well, that looks air defense-y. Now, one thing to note about the Mavericks on the F-16 is by default they are slightly off bore sight. You have to bore sight them. We'll see how to do that shortly. But here I am trying to move around, so I've taken note of the rough position. This is a white dot just to the left of this big white building, so I'm trying to track that. Not having any luck here, and this is likely because this is already destroyed. Mavericks are sometimes a bit fudged in DCS, and even though that is definitely a high contrast object because it's destroyed, sometimes the Maverick will refuse to lock on it. Just a little bit of the game modelling just being a bit funny there. I can see I'm not getting locked, so I decide, okay, this must be dead. So look for other targets, do get a lock there. This is not locked on what I am bore sighted on, so there is no point doing the bore sight. But do fire off a couple of other missiles at other targets here that I can get locks on. What I really should do at this point is dive my nose down. This is really hard angle here. Do start to dive down here, but a little bit too late. Mavericks can't turn that well, and so that was a bit of a waste. I should definitely have given myself more room. I was just mostly wanting to get some missiles off the rails there. I go look over the target to see if I do get any splashes coming in. I do believe I end up hitting a truck with all of that. You can see the smoke going up on the first thing I launched at. The other two were failed there. So not exactly textbook there. What I have decided at this point is I'm not going to worry about explicitly going for air defences because there doesn't really seem to be much. And this is one thing that's really useful to bear in mind when you take off the SEAD operations, is you can absolutely end up in a situation where there just aren't any available targets. And this is why I really like taking the Mavericks with me, because you can then just very quickly transfer over to do general ground attack here. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just searching for targets here, looking through different modes on the TGP. There are a lot of destroyed vehicles, but here I can see one absolutely intact tank here. And so this is a pretty good target for my Mavericks. Not going to be reducing the enemy air defense, but these tanks are difficult to take out for a lot of units, particularly things like the FAC artillery will not kill a main battle tank in one volley, and so using a Maverick to one-shot them is actually a really good plan here. So once again, coming in, once you target, it will automatically pass that over to the left-hand side. I then move my pod around. There it gets a lock, but it's on the on the radar. And what you may just have seen there is when I do get a lock on the same thing my target is looking at, I push the bore sight button, the BSGT, and that correctly bore sights the Maverick to the targeting pod, meaning that next time when I target, it should target the actual correct thing. You can do this on the way. You can just target a random object on the ground that you can identify, slew your Maverick over, get a lock on that, and then bore sight. Then from there on, you can just target with the targeting pod, and the Maverick will directly slew to the target. Here I'm just waiting, and as we can see there on the targeting pod, I do get a very nice shack. That is one Leclerc completely taken out of action here. So I'm just hunting around, seeing what else I can find. Still have some more Mavericks. And can see this vehicle seems to be destroyed. Go over onto the TV view, trying to work out if it's alive or not. Sometimes flipping between the different views can really help, as things are a lot clearer as to whether they're alive or dead, depending on what view you get. Now here you can see a lot of the vehicles have been destroyed. However, once again we've got a truck here, which is intact. So fine. It's better than nothing. I don't want to linger in the area too much. Have been keeping an eye on the EWR contacts in the top right. There are some units in the area. I'd prefer not to be engaged. And it's always a good idea when doing any kind of ground attack operation to still pay attention to what your EWR is telling you, because sooner or later someone is going to come along and take a shot at you. So once again, I just move my targeting pod over. This is at a different station, so it has not been bore sighted. You do have to bore sight for each station. So trying to get the view there, does get the lock. Once I'm happy, bore sight again, so that is both stations now bore sighted. Although I already know where another pair of tanks are, and so get those lined up. Now I do line my nose up with the target much better. Fire off my last Maverick. At this point I do flip over, that's my stores expended, so I can go on to Cat 1, gives me a little bit more manoeuvrability. Now that I don't have big heavy bags to deal with. And that also stops the master warning, which is always nice. There we go, I get a hit, and indeed do get a shack on the tank as well. Now at this point I am out of munitions, do have some planes on the way, but decide that it is better just to head home and rearm at this point. When it comes to landing, I'm not going to be going through the full landing procedure, it's a bit beyond the scope of this guide, but just remember that you want to come in nice and slowly. Nice thing about the F-16 is it is really good with its auto flaps, which are on by default, so you don't really have to worry about the flaps, they will happily deploy as your airspeed drops. Just try and keep your velocity vector indicator on the bottom of the runway and just nicely come in. Again, one thing just to bear in mind is it is worth giving out a call when you are going in on your final approach, just to let anyone else know that you are on the way and hopefully avoid them taking off into you. Good idea though is still always keep your eyes open, because people will very often either not hear or just ignore the SRS calls, and so there still can be traffic. Very easy to miss the traffic with all of the HUD lights that are going on, so just get ready to evade if you need to, and as soon as you're down, try and get off the runway as soon as you can. Once you are off the runway, do give another call over SRS just to let everyone else know that the runway is now clear. Now at this point you are absolutely free to simply rearm and repair, and then you can go up and do another sortie. On this particular session I did go up on another flight, and what you can see here is that this time when I have selected the Hawk site, I am getting the flashing reticule on my HUD, which means I could absolutely have launched a harm at that point. The flashing at the bottom of the HUD means that the harm that you've got selected is tracking what you have told it to attempt to track, and so you are free to fire at that point. What I decided to do here instead, mostly as a way of demonstration, is to head in with my Mavericks. So hunting around to see if I can get a bit more of a visual identification of either of these launcher sites. So I do see some vehicles here. That doesn't particularly look like a Hawk site to me, so I keep searching around. Again, going between the HAD display and the TGP is really useful. So again here you can see that out of the 4 Hawk sites that were there on my first attack, we still have 2 active, and so I'm wanting to do my best to take those out here. Again, just getting the vague area, seeing if I can spot any bright spots on the targeting pod, zooming in and out quickly just over any areas that I think look like they might be something. You can see that the targeting pod is very much updated there, so starting to get better ranging information. And I do like doing this from range, even though you don't get the best views at long range, you can often spot things that do let you build up your situational awareness of the target. And so yeah, that's also what I'm trying to do. I can see the airfield, getting some general look around the airfield, see if anything is jumping out at me, see if any aircraft are taking off from the airfield, try and spot any other potential threats, while at the same time just generally getting closer and gathering all of that really nice HAD information to get me better and better locations. So go back over to the HAD. You can see we've now got this one on PGM3, so that's starting to be reasonably close. Certainly not close enough just to launch a missile directly at it, but still getting there in terms of how close I need to be with the targeting pod. Now it's over to PGM2, that is now getting really close, and what I see is these little white dots off to the side, and when I zoom in, that is definitely a Hawk site. Can see the Hawk launchers, can see a destroyed search radar, but there is still an active radar. And so here I flip over, select my Mavericks, go and set that as the target, go over to the weapon page on the left, MFCD, since I am now done with the HAD display for now. Now we can see on the ranging scale on the right hand side I am out of Maverick range here, but I'm just taking the opportunity to slew over to where that target is. I can see the dot, the correct dot on my little display, but unfortunately the Maverick Seeker itself can't quite get it. Now what I do notice here is in the top right, I am 11 nautical miles away from a F-18. Now that is a serious problem. This is likely coming in to hunt me, and so I just really want to get my missiles off here. Would have been absolutely a good idea to abandon this and pull away. Would have been a better idea to launch my Harms using that HAD mode before. As it is, I get a lock on something, and so just fire off at one of the targets. I believe that's the command and control vehicle I spotted. And yes, I do need to adjust the sensitivity of my TDC. It's a little bit too sensitive on the F-16 here, and so I am flailing around a bit. I do have a curve on it, but it's being a bit awkward. Fire off another missile. Now actually get look at what I want to, quickly bore sight there, put my nose on target, fire away another one. Now I'm within 9 miles of the F-16 here, so do start to pull away. Fortunately I'm starting to get locked by various things, but there we go. You can see that I have taken out the command post, the Sea-Watch, I'm not entirely sure what that is, and the tracking radar. But now I have made a mistake there. I am very much too close. Quickly go over to dump my tank, which again I should have done beforehand when I had the time. And unfortunately this is a nice demonstration of why you pay attention to your EWR display, because I am well within range of that F-18. And he absolutely knows where I am. He's just being rather smart right now. He's keeping his radar off. He's not locking me until he's happy that he's close enough to engage. I do belatedly here go over to air-to-air mode. Now he's locking me. And unfortunately I do my best here to put him in the notch, turning him onto my 9 o'clock in this situation, try and make myself a little harder to shoot. Unfortunately I do overturn there, end up putting my nose straight on him, and so he just launches this missile straight down. I am chaffing and flaring, but it's not enough. And so that's kind of the last little lesson of today, is do just be aware you are vulnerable, and when you do start hunting down SAM sites you will attract attention. So keep an eye on things, keep an eye on your area, but that kind of gives you the general basics of how you do SEAD operations in the F-16 on the Contention server. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Do let me know what you thought of the format. I was trying to keep up with what was going on in real time, so it's kind of a voiceover, so it was a bit rushed in places. Do let me know if it was too rushed. I can certainly slow it down for next time. Let me know any other particular mission types you would like guides for. And until then, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.